In the quiet town of Maple Grove, Missouri, life moved slow. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where the scent of fresh coffee from Daisy's diner mingled with the sound of gravel crunching under pickup tires. For most people, Maple Grove was just another dot on the map, but for Daniel Parker, it was home. Daniel wasn't the kind of man who stood out in a crowd. He wore oil-stained jeans, a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled, and a calm smile that made even strangers feel at ease. He ran Parker's Auto Service, a small garage at the edge of town that his late father had started in the 70s. Daniel's hands were his livelihood, rough, scarred, and strong. But it wasn't just engines he fixed, he had a quiet way of mending people, too. When single mothers couldn't afford repairs, he'd wave away the bill. When old Mr. Jenkins' truck broke down again, Daniel would show up before sunrise, tools in hand, never asking for a cent. To him, it wasn't about money. It was about doing right. That's how his father raised him. Still, times were tough. Big repair chains had opened in the nearby city, pulling customers away. Daniel's business barely broke even, and the bank had begun calling about the overdue payments on the shop loan. His assistant, Rosie, a sharp-tongued woman in her 50s who'd worked beside him for years, often reminded him that goodwill didn't pay the bills. "Danny," she said one morning, waving a stack of unpaid invoices, "you can't fix half the town for free. The electric company sure ain't gonna thank you for your kindness." Daniel smiled, wiping his hands on a rag. "I know, Rosie. But I can't turn people away. It's not who I am." She sighed. "One of these days, that heart of yours is gonna cost you everything." That day came sooner than either of them expected. It was a cold Thursday morning when Daniel locked up early to grab a late lunch at Daisy's. The diner buzzed with local chatter, talk about the high school football team, the new mayor's pothole promises, and the winter storm on its way. After eating, Daniel headed home down Highway 9, a stretch of two-lane road cutting through farmland. That's when he saw it, a sleek black Lincoln Town car pulled to the side, steam hissing from under its hood. A woman stood beside it, arms crossed against the biting wind. Her clothes didn't fit the small-town look, tailored coat, leather boots, and an expression that said she wasn't used to waiting for help. Daniel slowed down and pulled over. "Need a hand, ma'am?" he asked, stepping out of his old Ford. She looked him over, wary but desperate. "Car just died. I was on my way to Springfield. I've called for a tow, but they said it could take over an hour." Daniel nodded and popped the hood without waiting for permission. "Mind if I take a look?" "Might be something simple." The woman hesitated. "You a mechanic?" "Been one all my life," he said with a grin. Within minutes, Daniel had his hands deep in the engine, tracing the problem. A broken fan belt. He rummaged through his truck for a spare, a habit of keeping odds and ends just in case. And luck was on her side. "You're in luck," he said. "Got one that'll fit. Give me a few minutes." The woman watched as Daniel worked quickly and quietly, his breath fogging in the cold air. When he finished, he wiped his hands and said, "Try it now." She turned the key, the engine roared back to life. Her relief was instant. "Oh, thank God." Daniel smiled. "You should be good for the trip now." "No charge." The woman blinked. "No charge? I can pay." He waved it off. "Just glad to help. Wouldn't sit right letting you freeze out here." She looked at him for a moment, like she wasn't sure what to make of this small-town man with kind eyes and no interest in her money. Finally, she said, "Thank you. I didn't get your name." "Daniel Parker." She nodded slowly. "I'll remember that, Mr. Parker." She handed him her business card anyway. "If you ever find yourself in Jefferson City, give me a call." He tucked it into his pocket, barely glancing at it before heading back to his truck. By the time he got home, the whole thing had already slipped from his mind. Just another good deed done. What Daniel didn't know was that the stranger's car he'd fixed belonged to Governor Elaine Marshall, one of the most powerful people in Missouri. And within days, his life was about to change in ways he couldn't have imagined. 2 days passed, and Daniel Parker had all but forgotten about the woman with the black Lincoln. He'd gone back to his usual rhythm, coffee at dawn, hands deep in engines by 8, and the quiet hum of small-town life filling the space between. Winter was pressing hard on Maple Grove. Snow flurries dusted the cracked pavement outside Parker's auto, and the heater inside the shop groaned as it fought to keep the cold out. Rosie sat behind the counter, sipping from her chipped #1 mechanic mug. "You look beat," she told Daniel, glancing up as he came in from the garage. "Late night," he said. "Had to finish up that old Chevy for Mr. Taylor. Didn't have the heart to make him wait another day." She smirked. "Didn't have the heart, or didn't want to see his wife give you another sermon about her church bake sale?" Daniel chuckled. "Maybe both." Just then, the shop phone rang, an unfamiliar number. Rosie picked up. "Parker's Auto," she said, then paused. "Ah, yes ma'am. One moment, please." She handed the phone to Daniel. "It's for you." "Sounds official." Daniel took it, wiping his hands on a rag. "This is Daniel." "Mr. Parker," came a warm, polished voice. "This is Governor Elaine Marshall. I'm not sure if you remember me, you helped fix my car a few days ago on Highway 9. Daniel's eyes widened. "Oh, yes, ma'am. I remember. Didn't realize you were, well." She laughed softly. "That's all right. Most people don't expect to see their governor stranded on the side of the road. I wanted to thank you properly. Your kindness meant more than you know." Daniel scratched the back of his neck. "Wasn't a big deal, ma'am. Just did what anyone would have done." "I'm not so sure about that, Mr. Parker," she said. "I'd like to meet with you, if you're willing. There's something I'd like to discuss." He blinked. "Meet? With me?" "Yes. Could you come to Jefferson City this Friday? My office will handle your travel and accommodations." Rosie, eavesdropping, mouthed the governor and nearly spilled her coffee. Daniel hesitated. "I appreciate the offer, but I've got the shop to run. Folks depend on me here." Governor Marshall's tone softened. "Daniel, sometimes life gives us moments we shouldn't turn away from. I'll have my assistant call you with details. Please, say yes." After a long pause, Daniel said quietly, "All right, ma'am. I'll be there." Friday morning came, and the town buzzed with quiet curiosity. Rosie made sure everyone knew Daniel was headed to meet the governor herself. By the time Daniel arrived in Jefferson City, he felt like a fish out of water. The capital was bigger, louder, faster, everything Maple Grove wasn't. He checked into a modest hotel, the kind where the staff greeted you by name, and tried not to overthink why the state's top official wanted to see him. At noon, a sleek black car pulled up outside. A driver in a suit greeted him with a polite nod. "Mr. Parker? The governor's expecting you." As they drove through the city, Daniel stared out the window at the tall buildings and wide streets. He felt small, a man of wrenches and grease in a world of marble and glass. When they arrived at the Missouri State Capitol, the driver led him inside, past security, and up to the governor's office. Elaine Marshall was waiting for him, this time without the tailored coat or the look of stress. She greeted him with a genuine smile. "Daniel Parker," she said, extending her hand. "It's good to see you again." "You too, ma'am," he said, shaking her hand carefully, afraid he might leave grease behind even though he'd scrubbed his palms raw that morning. "Please, sit," she said. "I'll get right to it. I told my staff about what happened on Highway 9, about how you fixed my car and refused payment. Do you know how rare that kind of honesty is these days?" Daniel shrugged modestly. "Just how I was raised, ma'am." She leaned forward. "That's exactly why I wanted to see you. We're starting a new initiative, Hands That Help, a state-funded program highlighting everyday Missourians who make a difference in their communities. Mechanics, teachers, farmers, people like you." Daniel blinked. "I'm just a small-town guy who fixes cars, ma'am. I'm not sure I fit into all that." "Oh, But you do, she said with a smile. Your story is exactly what we want to share. We'd like to feature you in our first public campaign, a televised segment. It would bring attention to Maple Grove and your shop. Rosie's voice echoed in his head. Kindness doesn't pay the bills. For once, maybe it could. I don't know what to say, Daniel murmured. That's quite an honor. Governor Marshall nodded. Then say yes. You've earned it. He did. As he walked out of the building later that afternoon, Daniel couldn't shake the strange warmth building in his chest. For the first time in years, it felt like maybe, just maybe, his father's lessons about kindness hadn't been in vain. But back home, not everyone saw it that way. Some folks whispered that Daniel had gotten lucky, others said he'd played the sympathy card. And when media crews started rolling into Maple Grove the following week, the town's simple peace began to crack. And Daniel Parker, the humble mechanic, found himself at the center of a storm he never asked for. The following Monday, Maple Grove wasn't the same quiet town it used to be. The story of Daniel Parker, the mechanic who fixed the governor's car for free, had exploded across local news. The Springfield Gazette ran a headline calling him Missouri's Good Samaritan mechanic. Then came the reporters, the cameras, and the curious travelers stopping by Parker's auto just to shake his hand. At first, it felt good. The attention brought a rush of new customers, people who said they wanted the honest mechanic from the TV. Daniel worked longer hours, smiling politely, trying to keep up. Rosie teased him, saying, "See, Danny? Your heart finally paid off." But not everyone in Maple Grove shared that sentiment. Some of his longtime customers started whispering, saying Daniel had sold out, that the governor's team must have paid him for the publicity. A few folks even claimed he'd staged the whole thing. In a small town, rumors spread faster than motor oil on concrete. Daniel heard them all, but he stayed quiet. He'd always believed people showed their true colors when someone else got a little light. By the second week, the media attention started to suffocate the town. A camera crew parked outside Parker's auto every morning, hoping to capture authentic shots of a working man. Customers began to feel uncomfortable. One afternoon, while Daniel was changing brake pads, a reporter barged in. "Mr. Parker. Just one quick question, how does it feel to be the face of Missouri's kindness initiative?" Daniel set his wrench down, wiping sweat from his brow. "Feels like a lot of attention for just doing what's right." The reporter smiled tightly. "Would you say this attention has changed your life?" He paused. "I'm still the same man I was before all this. Just trying to keep my doors open." But deep down, Daniel could feel the shift. That night, after the last camera crew left, Rosie leaned against the counter. "You okay, boss?" He sighed. "Feels like they've turned something simple into something I don't even recognize." Rosie nodded. "That's fame for you. Comes easy, leaves faster." Then she looked at him, serious now. "But don't lose that thing that got you here, your heart. It's what separates you from the rest." Daniel smiled faintly. "That's the plan." A few days later, a black envelope arrived at the shop with the state seal embossed in gold. Inside was an invitation to a governor's gala, an annual event in Jefferson City celebrating Missouri's community heroes. Daniel was listed as an honored guest. Rosie nearly squealed. "Danny, you've got to go. You can't say no to the governor." "I don't belong at some fancy gala," he said, chuckling nervously. "They'll take one look at me and wonder who let the grease monkey in." Rosie smacked his shoulder. "Don't be ridiculous. You earned it. And for heaven's sake, buy a decent suit." The night of the gala, Daniel stood before the mirror in a rented black suit that didn't quite fit right. He looked at his reflection, same calloused hands, same tired eyes, and shook his head. When he arrived at the Jefferson Grand Hotel, flashbulbs greeted him like a celebrity. Inside, the ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and polished marble floors. Waiters carried trays of champagne, and a live jazz band filled the air. Daniel felt out of place. He slipped to the side, trying to disappear into the wallpaper. That's when Governor Marshall approached. "Mr. Parker," she greeted warmly. "I was hoping you'd come." Daniel smiled politely. "Wouldn't miss it, ma'am. Though I'm not sure I belong here." "Nonsense," she said, touching his arm. "People like you remind us why we do what we do." Her sincerity eased him. They talked about Maple Grove, about the challenges of small-town businesses, about how small acts of kindness could ripple across an entire state. Then came the moment that changed everything, again. When it was time for speeches, Governor Marshall took the podium. "Tonight, we celebrate those who keep the spirit of Missouri alive, not through power or wealth, but through compassion. One such person is with us tonight." She turned toward Daniel. "Please welcome Daniel Parker, a man who showed us that goodness still exists in everyday hands." The applause was thunderous. Daniel stood awkwardly, cheeks burning, and gave a small nod before sitting back down. After the event, people approached him, business owners, community leaders, even a few investors offering to help expand Parker's Auto into something bigger. For the first time in his life, Daniel saw doors opening he never knew existed. But not all of them led where he thought. Back in Maple Grove, the glow of fame started to dim. While some praised him, others accused him of forgetting his roots. A few of his old customers stopped coming by. Worse, the loan officer from the bank, who'd once ignored his calls, suddenly showed up with new paperwork and better offers. Daniel began to feel trapped, pulled between who he was and who the world now expected him to be. One night, sitting alone in his garage after closing, he looked at the framed photo of his father that hung above the workbench. The caption beneath read, "Do right, even when no one's watching." Daniel whispered, "You never said what to do when everyone is watching." He stayed there for hours, the smell of oil and steel heavy in the air, wondering if helping a stranger had been the best or worst decision of his life. By early spring, the snow had melted, but things in Maple Grove still felt cold. The TV crews had left. The headlines had faded. The phone at Parker's Auto wasn't ringing as much anymore. The town had gone back to normal, except Daniel Parker hadn't. He tried to keep his head down, to get back to what he did best, fixing cars and helping folks. But something had shifted. People treated him differently now. Some came in with fake smiles, hoping for discounts or favors. Others avoided him entirely, like he'd somehow outgrown them. Even Rosie noticed it. "You know, fame's a strange thing," she said one slow afternoon, filing receipts. "People love you when you're a headline. But once the cameras are gone, they remember they're still stuck where they are." Daniel leaned on the counter, rubbing his hands together. "Guess I just wish things could go back to the way they were." Rosie gave him a soft look. "You can't unring a bell, Danny. You just learn to live with the sound." That evening, as Daniel was closing up shop, a black sedan pulled up. A man in a navy suit stepped out, polished shoes clicking against the concrete. "Mr. Parker?" he asked. "That's me," Daniel said cautiously. The man extended a business card. "Name's Harold Benton. I represent the Marshall Foundation, Governor Marshall's Community Outreach Initiative. We've been following your story, and the governor was deeply impressed by how you handled the media. We'd like to offer you something bigger." Daniel studied him. "Bigger how?" Benton smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "We're opening a statewide network of auto service training centers, giving young people job skills. We want you as the public face of the project. You'd travel, speak, appear in commercials, inspire folks." Daniel frowned. "I'm not a speaker. I just fix cars." "Exactly," Benton said smoothly. "That's why people will listen to you." Daniel hesitated. "I don't know. I've got a shop to run, employees who depend on me." "We'd pay you handsomely," Benton interrupted. "Enough to expand your business 10 times over. You'd have financial freedom for life." That last line lingered. Later that night, Daniel sat alone at his kitchen table, Benton's card in his hand. Financial freedom. It sounded tempting, especially with the bank breathing down his neck. But something about the man's tone had felt off. Too polished. Too practiced. He decided to sleep on it. A week later, Daniel got a call from an old friend, Sheriff Mark Caldwell, who'd known him since high school. "Danny, you got a minute?" "Sure, what's up?" "It's about that foundation rep, Benton. You met him, right?" "Yeah." "Why?" Mark's tone darkened. "Word is, he's under investigation. Misused funds from the state's grant program. Couple of small business owners already got burned signing contracts with him. Be careful." Daniel's gut twisted. "You think he's trying to pull something?" "I think he's the kind of man who sees good people as easy targets. Don't sign anything." Daniel thanked him and hung up, pulse pounding. For days, he ignored Benton's follow-up calls. But one afternoon, Benton showed up in person, again. "Mr. Parker, we haven't heard from you," Benton said, irritation creeping into his voice. "The governor's team wants an answer." "I've been thinking," Daniel said calmly. "And I'm not interested. If this is really about helping folks, you don't need my face for it." Benton's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake. People forget heroes fast." Daniel stepped forward, his voice steady. "Then they can forget me. I'm not for sale." Benton's smirk faded. "Suit yourself." He turned and walked out, the door slamming behind him. Rosie, who'd been standing nearby, let out a low whistle. "You sure you want to poke that bear?" Daniel smiled faintly. "If doing right makes enemies, I'll live with that." A few days later, Daniel learned that Benton had gone to the press. He leaked a false story, claiming Daniel had demanded money from the foundation and backed out when his terms weren't met. The local paper ran the headline, "Small-town hero turns down charity deal after payout dispute." It stung worse than any wound he'd ever known. Customers stopped coming again. The bank resumed its collection calls. People whispered all over town, the same mouths that once praised him now spread doubt. One night, Daniel sat outside the shop, looking at the fading Parker's Auto sign. It was past midnight. The stars above were dim through the haze of town lights. He thought of his father again, of the lessons he'd learned in this very shop. Work hard. Do good. Don't lose your name. Maybe the world didn't reward goodness, but that didn't mean it wasn't worth doing. The next morning, just before dawn, Daniel heard a car pull up outside the shop. When he stepped out, Governor Elaine Marshall herself was standing there, coat buttoned tight against the wind. "Governor," he said, startled. She nodded, looking weary. "I heard what happened. And I'm sorry, Daniel. You were right about Benton. He's been terminated and is facing charges." Daniel's jaw tightened. "The story he planted, it's ruined me here." She met his eyes. "Then let me help you make it right. Not as a politician, but as a person who owes you more than I ever repaid." Daniel hesitated. "I'm not sure the town will listen anymore." She smiled gently. "They will, if the truth comes from you." She handed him a folded piece of paper. "There's going to be a town meeting tomorrow. I'll be there. You should speak. Tell your story, all of it." Then she turned and got back into her car, leaving Daniel standing in the cold morning light, clutching that piece of paper like it was a lifeline. The morning of the town meeting dawned cold and gray. Maple Grove's main street was quiet, lined with old brick storefronts and the faint smell of rain. Inside Town Hall, rows of folding chairs filled quickly. Word had spread, Daniel Parker was going to speak. Some came out of curiosity. Others came to see the man who had once made them proud, then made them doubt. Daniel sat in the front row, hands folded, staring down at the calluses that had built his life. Rosie sat beside him, her usual fire softened by worry. "You ready?" she asked. He exhaled slowly. "No. But it's time." At the front of the room, Governor Elaine Marshall stood at the podium. When she began speaking, her voice was steady but solemn. "Good morning, everyone. I called this meeting because the truth deserves daylight. There have been stories, lies, spread about a man who represents the best of the state. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Elaine turned to Daniel and nodded. "Mr. Parker, would you come forward, please?" Daniel walked to the podium, every step heavier than the last. He looked out at the faces, familiar ones. Men he'd fixed cars for. Women he'd helped without charge. Kids he'd given rides home after football practice. He cleared his throat. "Most of you know me," he began quietly. "You've seen me around this town my whole life. I don't have fancy words, and I'm no politician. I just fix what's broken." He paused, his voice rough but honest. "Months ago, I helped a stranger whose car broke down on Highway 9. Turned out she wasn't just anybody, she was the governor. I didn't fix her car to get noticed. I did it because that's what my father taught me to do, help people. Be kind." He took a deep breath. "But lately, folks been saying I did it for money. Or fame. Or that I turned down a deal because it didn't pay enough. None of that's true. I turned it down because it didn't feel right. Because doing good shouldn't come with strings attached." His voice grew stronger now, carrying through the hall. "Some people will tell you kindness is weakness. That the world takes advantage of good men. Maybe they're right. But I'd rather be taken advantage of for doing right than rewarded for doing wrong." The room was silent. Even the old ceiling fan seemed to pause. Daniel looked down at his hands again, then back up. "I ain't perfect. Never was. But I know this, I'd rather lose everything I got than lose my name." He stepped back from the podium, eyes glistening but steady. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Rosie started clapping. It spread, slow at first, then growing louder until the entire hall was on its feet. Even the governor stood, tears shining in her eyes. The next morning, the Springfield Gazette ran a new headline: "Mechanic clears his name, town rallies behind local hero." The governor's office released a public statement clearing Daniel of all wrongdoing and exposing Benton's fraud. Within days, Daniel's phone rang again, this time, with real people needing real help. Old customers returned. New ones showed up, saying, "You're the kind of man I want fixing my car." Business slowly picked up, not because of headlines this time, but because of trust. Rosie teased him one morning as they reopened the shop. "See? Told you that heart of yours might save you one day." Daniel smiled. Maybe it just needed a tune-up. They laughed, and for the first time in months, the sound felt pure. A few weeks later, a black Lincoln pulled up outside Parker's auto again. Governor Marshall stepped out, this time, no cameras, no press, no entourage. Just her. She watched as Daniel wiped grease off his hands and came to greet her. "Governor," he said with a nod. "Daniel," she replied, smiling. "Thought I'd stop by and see how the shop was doing." "Running fine. Back to normal." "I'm glad," she said. "The world needs more people like you, Daniel. You remind us that leadership doesn't always wear a suit." He chuckled. "And sometimes it drives a Lincoln that breaks down." She laughed, a genuine, easy sound. Then her expression softened. "You taught me something that day on Highway 9. That real change doesn't start with power. It starts with decency." Daniel looked at her, then at the old Parker's Auto sign above the garage. "Guess we both had a lesson to learn." She extended her hand. "Don't be a stranger." He shook it firmly. "You either." As she drove away, Daniel watched her car fade down the same road where they'd first met. The same stretch of highway where a simple act of kindness had changed everything. He stood there for a moment, breathing in the cool spring air. Then he went back to work, because that's what good men do. In a world that often rewards selfishness, Daniel Parker's story reminds us that kindness still matters, even when no one's watching. Because sometimes, the smallest good deed can ripple farther than you ever imagine. If you believe the world still needs stories like this, stories of kindness, hope, and redemption, then hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share it with someone who could use a little reminder that doing good never goes out of style.